So let's look at the next stage. You've planned it. You've got some idea of the type of articles, what your focus is going to be. You've got some idea of what you're going to search for, how you're going to do it. You've got some kind of approach. When you actually undertake the review, one of the big questions is how do you approach, let's say that your search finds a little article here, right? What's the right approach to an individual article you come across? Because different methods will produce tons, in theory, tons, and in principle, tons of source material. And you'll get overwhelmed in a very short space of time, perhaps get frustrated by it. So, what you have to do is ask yourself, do you read the whole article that you find? Do you read all of it? Make some notes and move on, or even highlight it? Or do you only start? Now, I know that this is in the actual review phase. When you're surveying to work out what's roughly the flavor of the territory, you clearly aren't going to read everything because that would be a waste. But now we're actually conducting our review. The question is, should you still, whenever you stumble into an article, read all of it, or what we consider the abstract and perhaps the introduction, and at most the conclusion? Now, the recommended approach is that a more efficient way is not to read the whole article initially, but through your review process, you select articles by reading their abstract, intro, and conclusion related to your focus, and you put it to one side. You download it, you put it into a particular location to come back to read in more detail. But you try to, when you read the abstract, sketch out in some notes what its key point might be. Its key point is. Actually, that's what the abstract or the intro should give you a flavor of. Then what you can do is you end up surveying and gathering. Now when you're undertaking your project, remember this is a different thing from your initial. You've gone through it, so you know roughly what your question, your focus is here, right? Same method sort of applies to your initial thing, but we're not looking at Google here. You've targeted and made a decision when you enter this, when you're conducting the review, of what you think is a relevant source and what isn't. You've made those decisions in your plan, and that's how you're approaching this section. But what you're trying to look at is you might gather a simple document, and as you read each article, you do a 3 or 4 sentence summary of what's in that article. You put that to one side. Again, the next article, you summarize that. You pick out the key words and key concepts as you work through articles. Remember, you're not necessarily having to read all of it. Abstract, intro, and conclusion is a good way of building up a document which sort of captures in summary form each of the articles. Now, once you're in that position, you can then go through a further position of saying, actually, that article and that article that doesn't seem relevant, so I'm going to actually ignore that one. That one there and that one seem to be talking about similar things but disagreeing. This article down here that I've summarized seems really interesting and really to the point, and it captures what these other articles have all said, etc. You'll find yourself discovering those types of relationships. So you'll then need to go through a filtering process of which ones you're going to sit down and read fully. But when you read an article fully, they're incredibly slow. Academic writing especially if you're tackling journals, can be very difficult. The writing style, it's not necessarily very accessible. So you may find yourself struggling enormously when you come to trying to read the articles in full. But be cautious, don't get stuck in all the detail. Only read the article in full and give yourself a question to seek when you're going through that article. So say you've gathered up, right, all these short little summaries, and you've collected a whole group of articles that seem relevant because your plan says this is how I'm focusing it. You then go through it, you realize that one perhaps is a bit off topic. This one is a good one because it seems to capture some of the other points, so you'll start with that, and so on. So you've done that process. You then come to the process of, here's an article, and you know that you've got to actually read it fully through. Big problem when you come to that, Because when you read the article fully through, you could get stuck on page 3, not having a clue what it's talking about, or struggling enormously to separate out all the detail. So never read an article raw. When you decide to read an article, give yourself a bunch of smaller questions related to your overall focus that you are looking for answers in this article. Focus it. Think of each article when you fully want to read it like a set of smaller research questions which feed out of the whole research topic. But don't read it raw. If you read it raw, and I say this as an experienced researcher, reading subjects that are way outside my discipline area, you will just find it impossible to separate the details out in some cases. The technical jargon, the writing style, all of that will get in your way. So that's a very useful technique. Individual articles, when you come to the point of reading the whole thing, give yourself a series or a single series of questions that this article must try to answer for you. So say you've picked that it's talking about a particular concept, right, from the abstract. Then ask yourself a few questions of what you want to find out more before you tackle it. Okay, I hope that's clear. Very, very useful method. So the idea is that in this phase, you are literally gathering, analyzing. You're conducting your review by gathering the actual articles. You're producing small summaries of those articles just as a first step, and you will be reading fully the articles. But when we come to reading the articles fully, we enter the next phase, which is the analysis phase. So this phase does link, or this stage does link to the next stage, which is about the analysis. So we'll come to that in a moment. So we've got hopefully an idea when you're conducting it, and a method that you can tackle when you're trying to work through your particular articles.